Bob Roth. I'm a girl dad. I got three daughters, and I'm really proud of that. Um, I own, along with my brothers and my family, a in-home supportive care service company called Cypress Home Care Solutions. Next month, we'll be celebrating our 31st year. My background is consumer product goods. In 1985, my mother suffered a major heart attack at the age of 48 years old. And I found myself as a caregiver along with my brothers and my dad. And that was my first entree into caregiving. And I will tell you, in 1985, there was no such thing as an in home supportive care company. There was no, some call it non medical. There was no assisted living back in 1985. And it's hard to believe that was 40 years ago and how much has changed. So, my brothers and we moved here in 1994. My parents moved here in 1987. We wanted to be close to my mom because we knew that she was, getting there, closer to possibly death just because of her health and her condition. And we moved here to Phoenix, Arizona. And in 1994, we stood up a home care company to care for other people's moms and dads. So it's kind of like calling for me. I love what I do. I became an accidental caregiver and I shifted my career from being a consumer product goods marketer, brand manager, trade marketer, to now being a home care agency owner and really making differences in other people's lives and their families' lives. Because honestly, what most people need more than anything, and I'm talking about the family caregivers, we have 53 million of them out there in the world today in the US. They need respite. They need somebody to help them care for their loved ones so that they can take care of themselves. A not so known fact, and that is when couples caring for one another, 65 and older, if they are not getting outside help from a family member, friend, neighbor, or even a professional home care agency like ours, what happens is 63% of the time, the caregiver predeceases the care recipient. So I'm always out there advocating for the family caregiver. So it's a little bit about myself. The name of our company, Cypress Home Care Solutions, and I love what I do. It's hard to believe we're going to be celebrating 31 years, 21 years for me. I think more than anything, I think family caregivers need to really understand that they're not alone. And so many of them think they are. And they think that the other person could never understand what I'm going through. But we do. I mean, we've all been in those shoes before, and it's really hard work. And the fact is that they are truly the unsung heroes. They're the ones making the difference in so many lives. I mean, when you think 53 million caregivers, I mean, there's literally about 350 million people that live in our country. So if you do the math, that's like about 15% of our population is doing this work day in and day out. Never mind the fact that about 16 to 18 million of them are caring for a loved one that has Alzheimer's, which is even more difficult. So, I mean, first off, the fact is that we are aging at a rate that this country, let alone the world, has ever seen. We're talking about the 65-year-old population in the next 25 years doubling here in the state or in the country. And it's hard to believe that just 25 years ago, we were dealing with Y2K. So 25 years is going to come up on us really quick. So 65-year-old population is doubling, 85-year-old population is nearly quadrupling. And our population growth, in order to sustain 350 million approximately Americans, every child rearing female needs to have 2.1 children, and we're 1.7 and declining. So I think what really needs to happen is that we need to do a better job of planning. And planning is something that I think most Americans really need to understand. Need to understand that we need to be able to provide ourselves with long-term care supports. There's this misnomer out there that Medicare pays for this in-home supportive care that people need, which is non-clinical, and I want to talk a little bit about that. But more importantly, if it's not Medicare, which it's not, there's only four payer sources out there. It's private funds, or I like to call them family funds. It's Medicaid, but in order to be able and eligible for Medicaid, you need to have almost be financially destitute, and you have to score a certain level in terms of your health. So you have to be pretty much homebound. And just because you may not have the finances and you need some help at home, you're not going to get that. So private funds, Medicaid, VA benefits, and then long-term care insurance. And we're finding that people today are not planning like this last generation did. And this last generation had lots of planning in mind. Many of them were post depression babies. It was drilled into their heads from their parents that you need to have this reserve set aside. So many of them had long term care insurance and many of them had means. But I don't see that with this future generation. So I'm concerned. I'm really concerned. I really believe that we need to do a better job preparing, but more so, we need more practitioners. We need more nurses. We need more doctors. We need more nurse practitioners. We need more physician assistants. We need more caregivers. We need people seeing that healthcare is a really great place to be and a great place to find employment and really employment and enjoyment. Because I really think, and I think you'll agree with me, you you get so much satisfaction out of helping a fellow human being. It's incredibly rewarding. Well, I think it's really hard because, first of all, let me just say every state is different. So the state of Arizona is very different from, let's say, the state of Massachusetts or the state of New York or Florida. So there are different rules and regulations that fall into those parameters or into what the guidelines are for those states. But in the state of Arizona, our caregivers can never do anything medical, anything clinical, whether it be administering medications, you know, dressing a wound, you know, helping, insert a colostomy bag. I mean, these are things that are really left to clinicians. And as we are an aging population, it makes it really more difficult because you have to have somebody that has a skill set. Now, mind you, if you're a family member, you can do anything. But what the hardest thing that we're faced with right now is that we have so many people that are solo aging. I mean, when you sit down and you think about it, one third of our population, 65 and older, is living home alone. And it is predicted that in the next 25 years, that number is going to encroach on about 50%. So that's a scary thought. And knowing that these people are aging alone, there isn't that family member there to help. So I think an in-home supportive care company like ours and a clinically based company like Navi Nurses makes so much sense. So I mean, there's a lot of stories I could share, but the one story I want to share with is a gentleman that lived up in the Camelback Scottsdale Road area. And he lived in a nice home and he made it really clear. And so did his power of attorneys made it really clear. He does not want to move into an assisted living. He wanted to stay in his home. So we were providing care, and his needs became a little bit more involved clinically than we could do so. And that's one of the things that we pride ourselves in, the fact that we've been around for 30, almost 31 years, is we know that line in the sand and we know that we don't want to go over that line. So medically, when he started needing clinical needs, we called on Navi nurses because the amount of needs that he had were only for an hour a couple times a week, and that was really it. So why have him go into a nursing facility or into assisted living when he could stay in his home? And we chose you guys too, because when you find a caregiver and can match a caregiver with a client and get a consistent schedule together, then we were able to provide the same nurse on the same cadence for him. And just like it is with our caregivers, it's just vitally important for us to have that consistency. So you and I shared the client for close to a year and be able to serve his needs all the way till the end of his life. Hospice isn't a place, it's a concept. And I think most people don't understand that. I think most people think hospice is a place, but over 98 to 99% of the care that hospice provides is in the home. And the same with in home supportive care, helping with activities of daily living, and nursing can be done at home. But I don't think people really realize that. And I don't think people really realize how important it is. And when I say people, I'm talking about adult children, and I'm talking about people that may be being put into this power of attorney role. They don't realize that person inside that is needing care. So if you've lived in a house 30, 40, 50 years, you know where everything is and you're most comfortable there. And when you survey people, 90% 65 and older want to age in place, so we should give them that right. And knowing some of the data points that I shared previously, knowing that 65-year-olds are going to double and 85-year-olds are going to nearly quadruple, there's not enough housing, there's not enough beds in hospitals. So I really believe that I see a world where home is going to be the center of care. And I think home is the place where everybody wants to be. And I really believe that the world that we are in collectively is a world that is always going to need our services.
Yeah.
If you want to call it a misfortune, I was born with one kidney, and I've lived my whole life with that one kidney. And I had a little blip that happened at 17 playing contact sports, specifically high school football, but I survived that and didn't have an incident until 2020, 47 years later. And then in 2023, I had another incident. So I had an acute kidney issue, and you and I were together, and I was describing to you what I was dealing with. And I won't go into the details, but I will share with you the urologist that I was working with, and the one I worked with in 2020, now in 2023, after my hospital stay, said I had an urgent need to have surgery. Now, if anybody's watching this and you know that and I'm sure there are going to be, if you were born with one kidney, knowing that you need kidneys to survive, and when you think about the major organs in a body that you need to have working and working well, beside the brain and the heart, I think the kidney is right up there next to it. So the kidney is a really important organ. And I had this surgeon that wanted to do this pretty intensive surgery to me. And I wasn't accepting that. And I really believe most people today need to take control of their own health. And I did some research and I was like, okay, I'm not going to go have this imminent surgery that this guy wants me to have. So I went and sought out a couple urologists, and I was telling you this situation, and I was going to see urologists the next week. And you were very kind, Jasmine. So thank you. And you said, you know what? I have somebody that has been working at Mayo Hospital, that has been working in urology and nephrology for like 20 years. Is it okay if I have her come along with you? And I was like, sure, why not? I mean, I now have an expert that can come along with me. I believe Jenny was her name. So please give kudos to Jenny. Jenny was great. So Jenny met me at the doctor's office. I was in the exam, not in the exam room, the waiting room. And she went into the exam room with me and she took notes and, certainly asked questions, which was really good because I obviously had questions, but she had more intensive questions, more deliberate clinical questions than I did. And then afterwards, we had a consultation, and I asked her what she thought, and she agreed that she didn't think that this was something that immediate, but I should go seek more opinions, which I did. And I've delayed it, but I did discover that eventually I'm going to need that surgery, but it wasn't so imminent, and I really have Jenny and you to thank to really get somebody that had more experience and could ask the questions that I couldn't ask. And I know why you asked me to do this, and I appreciate it because I have clients, and I shared with you earlier that we have solo agers. 33% of our population right here is aging alone, and that number is only going to grow. So there aren't adult children to accompany them, there aren't partners to accompany them in the doctor's office. And I will tell you, it goes really fast today. And many of these practices are running like well oiled machines. Many of them are owned by private equity and they really have it figured out. But your time with the doctor is very limited and you want to make the most of that time. And I am happy to recommend to anybody who is seeing a physician or a specialist that needs somebody to be there with them that is kind of like a local expert or a specific expert into a diagnosis or an organ or a challenge that someone is experiencing medically, that they reach out to you and talk to Navi nurses. And this is no disrespect to doctors out there. I think nurses know more. They do. They really do. I mean, I think, nurses really understand not only the diagnosis, they understand the patient. And that's really important. I mean, it is the mind, body, and spirit. And we have to really know all three of them. And nurses can be able to capture all that. Where I think doctors, I mean, when they look at an MRI, they're looking at the MRI, they're not looking at the patient. When they're looking at an X-ray, they're looking at an X-ray, not the patient. I think nurses do a really good job of getting to know the patient, really understand what their needs are, and certainly really helping them through that journey, that medical journey that they're on, and really having an advocate. I think an advocate is really important. That's what you really need.
Yeah.
Look, knowing a lot of the data points that I've just shared, I really believe the model that you have built at Navi Nurses is a novel that should be replicated in other markets. And the reason why it needs to be replicated in other markets is that you're going to have home care agencies, professional home care agencies like mine, that cannot do the clinical piece. And the fact that we're there with the activities of daily living, helping my fictitious clients, Mrs. Abramson, helping Mrs. Abramson get up in the morning, making sure she takes her meds, has her meals, gets washed up, and gets out to her appointments, or just, more of the companionship that needs that they have because they're solo aging. But the medical stuff we can't do. And for most part, there aren't the family members there to be able to do it. But to be able to contact Navi nurses and say, okay, Mrs. Abramson needs the following. She needs, wound care, or she needs an IV therapy, 3 days a week, or she just needs somebody to check in on her, check on her vitals. Be able to put a cadence together like that is is a good thing. I mean, it's really challenging, and I'm in the space with home healthcare companies, and trust me, home healthcare companies, they've got a lot to handle. I mean, many of them are dealing with, lots of cuts in the Medicare reimbursement, and they're trying to figure out how to do more with less. Many of them are having a hard time employing nurses. I don't know what you've got going, Jasmine, but you've got a secret sauce. And I think it's because you're a nurse and the fact that you have such a great influence on so many people. You've really put yourself out there. You've been very vulnerable in the way you've shared your experience and say how and tell people how nursing should be, which I think a lot of people have forgotten. And it's really, really hard for nurses to work in some of the acute and post acute environments out there where you give them the opportunity to have more freedom and the ability to connect with people. That is such a beautiful thing. I mean, because that's why my daughter, Jessica, who's a cardiac trained as well as an OBGYN nurse, loves that patient interaction. And I think you miss that and you don't get that in the institutional setting, and you're able to get that in the home setting. So we'll always need nurses in those two settings. But the secret sauce that you have is that these nurses are usually they're maxed out at 36 hours, and they have additional hours in their week where they could really make differences and really meet to their desire, if you would, what the reason why they got into the profession, and have that, we'll call it the Maslow's hierarchy, right? The self actualization, and in terms of what they're getting from being in that field.
Yeah.
So obviously, a collaboration between our two entities makes a lot of sense today, and it makes a lot of sense for tomorrow. But the fact is the challenges, and I said it right from the beginning, cost is a really big problem because people have not planned for this. So there's a technology piece to this, and we've introduced some technologies, and you know this, Jasmine. So we have some wraparound services inside the home where we're monitoring when care really isn't there, and when care is there too. And what we're doing is we're looking to see obviously changes of conditions before they happen, right? The idea is to be able to protect and prevent. That's our goal. If we can protect and prevent a medical event from happening that causes an urgent care visit or a hospitalization, we all win. And the biggest winner is the client or patient themselves, right? So we want to keep them in the place where they want to be. So collaborative partnerships like what we have is really good, but with a wraparound when humans can't be there or someone that is monitoring the well-being of that person is really critical. So the other part is what can the nurses do for our caregivers? And obviously, our caregivers are not as experienced in some of these areas. So one of the things that nurses can do is help our caregivers understand what signs to look for. I don't want you to make a judgment, but I want you to look for these signs. And when you see these signs, feel free to reach out to us and let us know what is happening so we can intervene before an event happens. So it's those types of things. Nurses have great experience, great training, but we want them to be able to share that with our caregivers who are there on a more frequent basis. I like to say that our caregivers are more like the tip of the spear, right? We see the change of condition before a lot of times the family members, or certainly that individual may even see themselves.